to God. Look who's here. Look who's here. It's kind of helpless, right? Maybe a little cold even, right? And you're probably saying, just please, put him back in the manger. Manger in one piece. Yeah, just a little baby. God with us. My sermon illustration. Now we can all go home. Really? They're safe and sound in Mary's tiny little hand. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Even though Christmas isn't technically over until Tuesday, Epiphany, let's face it, or let's rejoice, the party is over. We rang in the new year, we've had our vacation, we've had our sleep-ins and naps and days off. Now it's time once again to set the alarm for tomorrow morning. Right, Joanne? Right. The decorations go back in the attic or the basement. Little by little, the house is restored to its pre-Christmas condition. So, since 2007, it's my best guess, Jim and I have spent the week between Christmas and New Year's Day at Holy Cross Monastery on the Hudson. Anybody ever been there? Yeah. One of many Anglican religious orders that my friends are constantly surprised to hear still exist, or ever existed. Because, believe it or not, you do not have to be a Catholic to be a monk or a nun. You can be Episcopalian. And as members of the tribe of Episcopalians, my husband Jim and I love this environment. We love the liturgy, the sounds of the brothers chanting the Psalms 5 times a day. We love the Hudson River view, but mostly we love the freedom from domestic responsibility. Sounds good, huh? All meals are included, and the chef is very, very good. No bread and water for these monks, let me tell you. We've gotten to know the brothers over the years, and we love them and enjoy their company. So, it's a rude shock on New Year's Day when they put us out. And we have to go home and return to our lives of walking the dog, making meals, cleaning the house, and going to work. Reality is back. And this is also the trend we notice in today's Gospel from Matthew. Reality is back. In order to let you in on just how real, I have restored the portion of Matthew's Gospel that is left out of today's lectionary reading. You may have wondered, if not, that it goes from 13 to 15, and then it skips to 19. So what is missing? Well, I'll tell you what is missing. When Herod saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, he was infuriated, and he sent and killed all the children in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had learned from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah. The voice was heard in Ramah, wailing in loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be consoled because they are no more. Known as the slaughter of the innocents. And this has also given rise to a feast day in the Episcopal Church, the Feast of the Holy Innocents. And it so happened, as usual, that while we were staying at the monastery, it was during that time that we observed the Feast of the Innocents. And for a feast day, it is customary at Holy Cross for the meal to be, for the feast day to be observed with a fancy dessert. But on this occasion, the prior thought dessert might be in bad taste. We're going to celebrate the slaughter of the the reason that it's left out of the Gospels again. Because it's not in good taste, right? It's a Christmas buzzkill. But I don't think we're too squeamish to bear these truths, do you? Yeah, we can take it. Just like real life, there can be both grief and gratitude in the same story. Before we get to the gratitude, however, I think we need to confront the grief and talk about this very cruel event, only 10 days after Christmas. When we last saw our Holy Family, they were sleeping in heavenly peace. Today, in this lesson, they are fleeing for their lives. And the little baby didn't look ready to go on a journey, did he? Not dressed like that. Because little boys under the age of 2 are being slaughtered by Herod's henchmen. Because of Jesus being born. Because, in Herod's paranoid imagination, one of these 2-year-old boys might have been a threat to his power. I know what you're thinking. Thinking, why didn't we sleep in instead of coming here and hearing this gruesome story? It's like having your Christmas joy all crumpled up in this big serving of leftovers. Reality leftovers are being served up. But this is how it is for the baby. This is the reality. He is born in a filthy feeding trough after his mother gives birth, with the smell of manure and sweaty beasts filling the air. From its earliest dawning, life for the baby is unsafe. Very unsafe. It's painful to think of a vulnerable infant in an unsafe place, isn't it? Even though there are quite a few, even now. When we imagine the suffering of our Lord, we generally think of Easter, not Christmas. We call this, or sometimes people call this, the shadow of the cross. The reminder that life will have suffering, and that even in life, we are in death. But I have had it pointed out to me recently that there's also the shadow of the manger. Did you ever think of that? In becoming human, God chose to be conceived by and born of a woman. God chose to enter into creation, taking on not only our humanity, but the fragility and dependency of the human infant. Now, the human baby is extremely helpless. And this kind of happened over time in the development of human beings. Some say due to a shortening of the gestation period, pregnancy. When our early female ancestors began walking upright rather than on all fours. So you can see how gravity might have helped to shorten the gestation period. No other mammal is quite as unprepared for life, as dependent on others as the human baby. The tenderness of a baby, the soft cuddliness of the baby, is also the weakness of the baby. I have heard that a baby buffalo can get up on 4 legs and run with the herd almost upon birth. It has instincts. Not so with human children. They are a blank slate, abjectly helpless. No fur, no scales, no hard shell, no instincts. Well, the one instinct they say we have, just in case somebody wants to question me on this, sucking, so that they can feed. They need affection and protection. Our Christ child was one of these creatures, soft, impressionable, and growing up in a dangerous world. The only thing standing between the human infant and certain death is love, which turns out to be no small thing. So, speaking of babies, who here, raise your hand if you are familiar with the amazing BBC production, Call the Midwife. All right. I think I only got one at the 8 o'clock service. So, if you aren't, you should be. It's really quite good. I have never seen so many babies being born on television. in such graphic, explicit, realistic detail. And it's based on a true story by a woman named Jennifer Worth, who wrote of her experiences in a book called The Midwife, a memoir of birth, joy, and hard times. You could say this about Jesus, right? The story of Jesus, birth, joy, and hard times. This show is so popular. You wouldn't know it at 8 o'clock service, but this show is so popular. Some say it has even eclipsed Downton Abbey as the Anglophiles' favorite. Not a chance, huh? And not only among women. The brothers of Holy Cross Monastery were crushed when the cable went down and they weren't able to watch the Call to Midwife Christmas special. I mean, after all, they're monks, and this is a convent, and so and you do see scenes of chanting the Psalms and so on. The convent of Nonatus House, it's called. Most of the sisters there are nurses and trained midwives, but the need was so great that they took on a few laypersons who were nurses and midwives, and Jennifer Worth, who wrote the memoir, was one of them. The phone in Nonatus House rings, and a midwife is sent out to the women in labor on bicycle. So you've got a show with nuns on bikes, a somewhat demented sister who quotes Keats, candlelit chapels, and old-fashioned English prams. So with all of that preciousness, you would think the show would be unbearably sentimental. But you would be wrong, right? One actress that's in it described it as soft on the outside, but gritty on the inside. Childbirth is hazardous, and the conditions in the West End of London, where this is set after World War II, are impoverished and mean. In some ways, the British healthcare system, which is also in its infancy at the time, comes out the biggest hero. They offer pre- and post-natal care. They have clinics, tuberculosis screenings, which was still rampant, polio, which was still rampant, inoculations to all comers, regardless of their ability to pay, along with courses in what they called mothercraft. Nice sound to it, doesn't it? Because things like TB, polio, spina bifida all make an appearance in this show, as there's also domestic violence, broken hearts, broken vows, are all contained in this television drama, right alongside the miracle of birth. So I did a little research to find out how they managed to make the birth scenes so realistic. It turns out they do have, as I suspected, what they call a prosthetic baby. But they also use real infants that are only days old, with their mothers just standing just off screen, So, whew, they're really beautiful, I'm telling you. Another actress from the series, when she was interviewed, said that when you're confronted by a newborn, it doesn't take any acting in order to open your heart for your, she said, your whole body changes and softens, your face smiles. This is the reaction God intends, obviously. So throughout the series, we hear the words of Jennifer Worth, written in her memoir, spoken by Vanessa Redgrave, with impeccable grace and gravity. I will offer up a few quotes from the book this morning, but you'll have to imagine the voice of Vanessa Redgrave to get the full impact. Whoever heard, too bad Pauline's not here, she could do it. Whoever heard of the midwife as a literary heroine, asks Jennifer Worth in her memoir. Yet midwifery, she goes on to explain, is the very stuff of drama. Every child is conceived either in love or lust, is born in pain. Oh, a lot of screaming goes on in this show too. Followed by joy, or sometimes remorse. A midwife is in the thick of it. She sees it all. The manger and the shadow of the manger. There is so much at stake when a child is born. So many ways it can go wrong. Hardly an episode goes by that I don't find myself in tears. sobbing sometimes. The vulnerability of mothers and their babies speaks to us, calls to us, asks us to take responsibility. There are so many stories I could tell about babies and children in mortal danger. I'm sure, in fact, that they are in today's newspaper. Stories of vulnerable populations with no access to health care, not even access to clean water. Refugee babies who are forced to flee their unsafe environments, just as Joseph, Mary, and Jesus had to flee to Egypt. Syrian families, Ebola, orphans, Nigerian schoolgirls. I don't have the heart to name them all. You know who I mean. They live in the shadow of the manger, the shadow of our human helplessness, and they call on us to take responsibility. These scenes invite us to a new way of recognizing, loving, protecting, and serving the Christ who lives in every infant and child, and indeed in every person. They invite us to make the connection between the suffering of our infant Lord, who inspires our love, and the adult Lord, who triumphs over the forces of evil. Both the shadow of the manger and the shadow of the cross make a claim on us to love God and to love our neighbor as ourselves, which is not always so easy. As Jennifer Worth, she's questioning one of the older sisters. I guess she's interested in her motivation. So she asks, was it love of people? Of course, no, she snapped sharply. Some of these nuns are in the stereotypical nun mold. How can you love ignorant, brutish people whom you don't even know? Can anyone love filth and squalor, or lice and rats? Who can love aching weariness and carry on working in spite of it? One cannot love these things. One can only love God, and through His grace, come to love His people. In a few days, it will be Epiphany. So, what a roller coaster ride we're on scripturally, right? On Tuesday, we're going back in time a little bit, sort of like a flashback, to the night when the star led the way to the baby who was still in the manger. We have passed through the watchful waiting of Advent, joyful hymns of Christmas that celebrate the birth of Christ, only to find ourselves now up to our ankles in the blood of the slaughtered infants. The Holy Family flees in the night in order to avoid the same fate for their infant son. This is about as real as it gets. A strong dose of reality. And so true to life when you think about it. The way things can go from blissful to terrifying in the blink of an eye. This is true not only for infants, but for all of us. The Bible makes liberal use of the metaphors of labor and birth for a good reason. You know, the whole creation is groaning in travail and so on, to remind us that there is no new life without pain and blood. Thanks be to God. The midwife pulls new life out of death.